So in a historic decision at the beginning of the 2023 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Dubai, nearly 200 nations have reached an agreement to establish a fund to assist countries grappling with the effects of global warming. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who arrived in Dubai last night, has called for climate financing and technology transfer to developing nations, empowering them to effectively confront the challenges posed by climate change. He is going to speak today. He is also scheduled to participate in 2 special initiatives on climate events. He will also have 7 bilateral meetings along with several informal meetings with world leaders. This is the 3rd visit of the Prime Minister in a climate action summit. Remember, India has in the last few years become increasingly proactive at the annual Climate Change Conference, also known as the Conference of Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or simply COP. The climate talks in Dubai come at a critical juncture as global emissions continue to surge. UN on Thursday had announced that 2023 is on track to be the hottest year in recorded history, highlighting the urgency for immediate action. Now, the establishment of a loss and damage fund, long advocated for by climate vulnerable nations, has also marked an early victory at COP28. Let's go across to my colleague Mohammad Ghazali, who is in Dubai and tracking this event for us. Ghazali, hundreds of experts, heads of countries have gathered in Dubai. Big day for climate action. But COP28, is seen as this biggest climate conference in history, and, it's hosting 140 heads. It's actually, the number seems to be double from last year's COP27. So what is the general sense of expectations on the outcomes there, and what does this mean for India that has been advocating, this lifestyle for sustainability of the environment?
See, we need to understand that what is the core issue of this COP summits which happen every year. The major issue being addressed here is, or what the leaders think and plan here is, how to check the global warming degrees, and whether, like many studies suggest, that the global warming or the temperature on an average will increase by 1.2 to 1.5 by 2035. Some suggest that by year 2100 it may even increase at the rate of 4 degrees Celsius or 3 degrees Celsius. So to check that, many options are being discussed here in every summit. Now, when it comes to India, the India-centric issue is like the emission of green gas. India, being the developed country, has always been vocal about the issue that the developing countries, including India itself, are not the major contributor towards the global warming or towards the emission of green gas. India has been called out by the West for the emission of methane during paddy cultivation, as well as for the coal extraction, which also contributes towards the global warming. But India has been very steadfast and assertive that it cannot ignore its local demands or the domestic demands, be it for the food security challenges or for the power generation. But India also says that it is moving towards the cleaner energy options, be it solar, be it the nuclear energy, be it the hydrogen energy. And India has been making such alliances. Yesterday, when the Prime Minister landed here, he spoke to a local newspaper here, as well as in the presence of the Deputy Prime Minister, and said that how with UAE, many futuristic energy sources were discussed, and solar being on top of that. So maybe today, when the Prime Minister speaks in the World Climate Action Summit in a short while from now, he will also address about what progress India has made efficiently in mitigating the climate crisis, and how India has also been asserting that how developing countries also need not just finance, but also transfer of technology. So finance and technology transfer would be the key issues which the Prime Minister will be speaking here in the Climate Action Summit after a short while from now. And also, India has also been talking about in the G20 summit about the Global Biofuel Alliance. So all the renewable sources of energy, India has been stressing that the countries should come forward to adopt that, develop technology for the developing countries. And that was also a major breakthrough yesterday when the loss and damage fund was operationalized by major developed countries here. They agreed upon it, and the host UAE announced the first donation or the first contribution towards that, and then rest of the developed countries also followed it. So we'll have to see that as a common citizen of any country, what are the heads of the state going to discuss about it. We have seen back in India that how in 2021 the wheat productivity got impacted due to overheat or unseasonal heat in the month of March and April. Now that also, we have also seen the civic infrastructure in major cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad or Pune, or even in the south, that how it has been impacted due to unseasonal rain or overheat or increase in temperature in the months where it's not expected. So these are certain issues which the Prime Minister and other global leaders will discuss, that what kind of technology, what kind of efforts are needed to check the global warming, and also all those issues which have been discussed in such summits in the past, their progress report will also be tracked.
So, Ghazali, despite holding the distinction of being the world's two largest polluters, heads of United States and China, they are not attending COP28. So, but then, there is this display of unity because both nations have also issued a joint climate declaration that came ahead of the conference. How is the world looking at this?
See, Vasudha, we should also keep in mind that this entire summit is happening at a time when there is continuous global conflict, be it the Russia-Ukraine thing happening for the last 2 years, Israel-Hamas thing is happening. And amid that, India has got a very good opportunity to raise its significant voice and also represent the voice of the global South. This is what the Prime Minister has been doing, be it in the G20 summit or be it here today in the summit here at COP28. Now, India has also been talking about that how to find a way out to fight this climate crisis, and it has also stressed that how developed countries are the major contributors. Around 60% of the green gas emission comes from the from countries like US and other developed countries, including China. So in the absence of representatives of China or US here makes it viable for India, makes it favorable for India or the Prime Minister to raise those issues more vehemently and look for a more formidable solution rather than just holding the talks and go back home.
Right. Thank you, Ghazali, for joining us. We also have Sunita Narayan, environmentalist and director of the Center for Science and Environment, and Vaibhav Chaturvedi from the Council of Energy, Environment and Water, a think tank, joining us. Ms. Narayan, hours before the Prime Minister of India reached Dubai, India reiterated its position that it cannot abandon its reliance on coal for electricity generation anytime soon, but it is also rapidly ramping up renewable energy supplies and it's also transitioning into clean energy, but that process is going to be slow. How do you see India's position in terms of its increasing influence and participation in this whole global climate action?
So I think India is playing an important role in putting forward its positions. I definitely am disappointed if we go back to coal. But I do understand the imperatives of countries like India in this context. And I hope that as climate change is now such a big reality and an urgency, that we will find the roadmap to be able to do what we had set ourselves to do, which is not to ramp down coal, but to ramp up renewable power. And I think that's the leadership that the world needs. But of course, the world also has to step up and provide the funds, the technology that will enable countries like India to make the transition. That's what COP is about. But for now, there is an early win on loss and damage. And I think we need to take a moment to celebrate the fact that our leaders have come together at such a time when the world is so fractured, so divided, that they have come together to be able to set aside the differences and agree on a major fund for loss and damage, which is needed in all countries of the South, including India. Our own report on extreme weather events tells you that we've had one event a day. So very big issues. Important that the world comes together now because the clock is running out on us. Thank you very much.
Right. Mr. Chaturvedi, when we talk about this loss and damage fund, of course, it's seen as one of the early successes of COP28. This is also wealthy nations offering big money pledges to help poorer countries to cope with the ravages of, something of a world that's constantly warming. But do you think that this could also turn up pressure on countries like China, forcing them to open their checkbooks?
Yes, indeed. First of all, very good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the show. So you are right. This answer to whether developed world will pay or not is actually not very clear. It's in the text. It is not. They have not accepted that they will be the only ones who will be paying. The expectation of the developing world is that they should be paying, but it is not really the case as of now. Their argument is that, well, some other large developing economies should also be paying along with the developed world. Essentially, it means, China and Saudi Arabia, very rich nations. China is investing everywhere around the world in BRI projects, and it is kind of bizarre that when it comes to climate finance, it sits in the recipient kind of category. Indeed, it cannot be a recipient. At some point of time, it's a large enough economy, and its greenhouse gas emissions are like more than a quarter of the global emissions. It is the largest emitter. It is pretty rich. So of course, that's what the expectation of the developed world is, that some large economies should also pay. And as I said, the debate is not settled because China is not so ready to be in that category. So the tussle is ongoing. What Sunita also said, it is great that the first step has been taken. The fund has been set up. All the countries have agreed. It's also discussed that for the interim period of 4 years, the World Bank is going to host the fund. So all of those are great developments. But I think most important will be how much fund we'll manage to collect, who will pay, and what is going to be the principal, like who will be the users. Who will be this fund be disbursed to. And those questions need to be solved as soon as possible. Hopefully, in this COP, we'll make some headway in that direction. Last COP, this was a big sticking point between like who will pay, was a big sticking point.
Right.
Hopefully, some reasonable progress will be made in this COP.
Mr. Chaturvedi, there's a lot of talk about tech transfer, technology transfer, because these are big nations with, of course, there is resources and also the tech expertise, when it comes to climate action. Explain to us the importance of something like technology transfer to counter global warming.
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting subject because tech transfer has always been a part of the debate. Practically, it has never actually happened. So it's not about countries, like who owns the technology. It is essentially companies that have invested in R&D. They hold the patents for these low carbon technologies. It's not just that these companies will be giving away these technologies for free. So that's why this has happened. We need to evolve a framework, global framework, where companies who have invested in technology are also able to recoup kind of reasonable profits from whenever, whichever has been the successful technology. Historically, very little progress has actually happened on ground as far as tech transfer is concerned. Now, has that impeded transition? Well, more than tech, it is the finance part that has impeded the transition, because technology diffusion, once a technology, let's say electric vehicles, it's not that India is getting electric vehicle technology for free, right? But some other place, let's say it was discovered or the innovation happened even in the developed world, but the tech diffusion has been fantastic across the world. So the process of technology diffusion it happens in the private sector. It happens pretty well. The big stumbling block is if some technology is expensive enough and is in the developing world, we don't have the fiscal space. Consumers don't have that kind of money to buy these technologies, whether it's end-use technologies, whether it's industrial technologies like green steel. We actually don't have that kind of finance. So that's why finance is a much bigger challenge for developing economies. Tech transfer is a very important debate. I don't really hope actually a lot of progress will happen in that direction. It is always there as one of the agenda items, but very little progress on ground. But finance is a lot more important issue according to me.
Mr. Chaturvedi, when you talk about, India's commitments and, promises and also delivery, we see that India raised the emission intensity reduction target to 4% and, the non-fossil fuel-based electricity target was also raised to 50%. Now, on the side, we also launched some very global initiatives on climate change, and that received the backing of many countries. In fact, on G20, during G20, India's presidency, we did see a lot of talk on climate action. One family, one earth, one future was also related to environment. But when it comes to numbers, how do you see India's commitments and delivery on climate action?
I think India's progress in the last 10 years has been fantastic, right? We should know, if you compare, let's say, India's per capita income as compared to even China or the developed world, we are still, far from being like officially a high income nation. So given the fiscal space in which we are in, given that our developmental priorities are so paramount, that in education, health, sanitation, water, we are making rapid progress and we need to make rapid progress. Those things will always be our priority. Given that reality and given that backdrop, still you see tremendous action happening in terms of renewable energy and in terms of energy efficiency, especially also in terms of climate adaptation, right? So a lot of stuff has happened in the last 10 years. It's very, very, very clear. And it's also, if I just take a step back, it's also about the larger geopolitics of nations, in the sense we want to increasingly showcase our leadership on a variety of issues. Climate is one of the foremost of those. And many, many examples, be it International Solar Alliance, be it the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, where India has been the fountainhead of these global initiatives. Clearly, full
so
marks.
Climate action has been a priority for India, and there's been considerable progress in the last few years. That is what Dr. Chaturvedi, Vaibhav Chaturvedi, joining us from CEEW. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.